Okay, so just to preface this was on Friday the 27th, and my friend and I just smoked cannabis before going out to eat and catch a movie. So my friend and I are in line at BK and trying to decide if we want to split a meal or get separate ones. My friend orders her food, and when I get to order, I get straight up asked if we had smoked weed. My first thought and question was, is it really that noticeable? Now I could barely hear this guy because he was speaking low, but he was asking about a certain strain that I could really care less about. But it gets to the point where he tells me how much I could get for a certain price point, which I said that I would keep in mind. Now my friend and I didn't spray any perfume or body spray. We normally do, but we just completely forgot to this time. I get to the table that my friend picked out and I start telling her about what had just happened. Not even a minute after I sit down, this guy comes over and passes me a folded up napkin of this weed to sample. Now my friend and I are just shocked and talking about this. I ended up putting the napkin in my bra because it was the only place that I could. I had no pockets. This guy ends up coming to our table 3 to 4 more times within the span of 15 or 20 minutes. When I went up to get my food before these other encounters had occurred, this guy had to let me know that he got off at 7:30 p.m. and asked if we wanted to hang out. I straight up said that my friend and I were on a date and that we were going to a movie straight after this. After I got my food, this guy stopped at our table to ask what movies were playing. What his name was, I don't remember what he said, just that it had something to do with California's state bird. And the other times I can't remember why he came over. He just spoke to me and not my friend, and I could tell that this guy was trying to get some information on me. Now, I'm a very private person and also a very cautious person. I could tell that this guy was trying something and I acted dumb, even though I knew what was going on. My friend had noticed that after the last time he came over that this guy was staring at me any time he passed by. I could tell that he was staring at me because of the windows that made a reflection, because my back was to him. It got to a point where I told my friend that we need to hurry because this was all making me uncomfortable. So we finished eating quickly and we left. Now my friend and I did originally go to the movie theater, but decided to watch the movie at home because of how busy it was. When we decided to watch the movie at my place, we tried to hurry and leave because of the time, and that guy was going to be getting off at any minute. I don't think that I'll be going to BK anytime soon because my hair color is blue. It's very noticeable and not many people have that color in my town. Plus, it's a small town. I hope to never meet this guy again, and if I do, I may have to have a backbone, especially if he acts like he did this time. About 3 years ago when I was 18, I worked as a waiter in a restaurant in the mall. I'm very introverted, but it never affected my relationship with my customers, but speaking to people I wasn't serving gave me major butterflies. I had just finished my shift around 5 and I was walking out, when I noticed a woman who looked in pain, holding her stomach and was looking right at me. I had to walk past her to get to the exit and I was trying to avoid her because I wasn't looking for a conversation, and I hated when people would ask for money. Yeah, I know it's selfish, but I worked really hard for the little money that the customers tipped me that day. I maneuvered my way around the people, but she called out to me. I acted like I didn't hear her, and I moved faster. Eventually, she ran to me and grabbed my arm and cried, "Please, please, brother, I got children and I got cancer of the tummy." She lifted up her dirty shirt and showed me a large surgery wound across her stomach. I told her that I didn't have anything, but she continued to badger me. Eventually, I just ran to the stairs and went upstairs, and saw her chasing, but I was way faster than her. She slowed down at the second case to catch her breath, and I turned into it to get off at the 3rd floor where she couldn't see me. I took the elevator next to the stairs back to the first floor so I could get to the exit. Eventually, I got to the bus stop and I was on my way home. When I got off at my stop, I went to the corner shop to get a piece of bread. At the end of the road, I saw the woman from the mall and her boyfriend. They must have definitely seen me even though I made an effort to take a longer way home so they wouldn't have seen me. Around 7 o'clock, I get a knock at my gate. I live in a house that has 2 slide gates in front of the main entrance. I look out the window and to my horror, I saw the woman and her boyfriend. I stayed quiet and hoped that they would just go away, but they stayed outside of my house for 2 hours until my parents arrived. They begged my parents for money or food to feed their kids. My father found it weird that they were there at that time of night, so he told them that we didn't have any and to get away from the house before they called the police. Surprisingly, they left without a hassle. I told my parents that these people were begging me for money at the mall and that they followed me home and stayed outside the house for over 2 hours. And we never saw them again after that day. This incident occurred a few years ago when I was in my early 20s. I had a part-time job that required me to work late, and since I didn't have a car, I relied on public transportation to get home. Most nights it was uneventful, but one particular evening stands out vividly in my memory. I had just finished my shift and made my way to the bus stop. It was past 11 p.m. by this point, and the area was unusually quiet. As I stood there checking the bus schedule on my phone, I noticed a man sitting only a few feet away from me, staring intently in my direction. His presence made me feel uneasy, but I tried to brush it off as simply being a bit paranoid. The man, probably in his late 30s, had a disheveled appearance. His eyes seemed fixated on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching my every single move. Ignoring the discomfort, I continued looking on at my phone, pretending to be absorbed in the screen. Minutes passed and the bus was running late. As I glanced up from my phone, I noticed the man had moved closer. He was now standing just a few steps away, staring directly at me. I felt a surge of anxiety, but I didn't want to draw any attention to myself by making a scene out of it. Trying to appear nonchalant, I took a step back, closer to the edge of the well-lit bus stop area. The man mirrored my movements, and that's when my heart began to race. He started muttering something underneath his breath, his gaze fixed on me, and I realized that he was inching even closer to me. My instincts screamed out at me that something was not right. I tried to catch the eyes of the occasional passerby, hoping for someone to notice the situation, but it seemed that we were alone in that late night emptiness. The bus finally appeared around the corner, and relief washed over me. I quickly gathered my things, keeping an eye on the man, and I made a beeline for the bus doors. As I stepped onto the bus, the man hesitated for a moment and then abruptly turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I immediately alerted the bus driver about the unsettling encounter, and they assured me that they would keep an eye out. I found a seat near the front, feeling a mix of relief and lingering fear. Though nothing more happened that night, the incident left me shaken. I couldn't shake off the feeling that the man's intentions weren't entirely benign. From that night on, I made sure to be extra cautious when commuting late at night, always aware of my surroundings and never ignoring any gut feelings that warned of potential danger. So, this happened years ago when I was a dumb teenage girl who loved walking the city alone after dark. This took place in Eastern Europe for context, in a city with a tramway system. On this one night, I was in the station waiting to catch the last tram home. The 3 trams stopped at the station, 2 of which went where I was going. That'll be important for later. It was around 10 p.m. and as I sat there waiting, lost in thought, I barely registered a man quietly walking up and standing by the shelter. I thought nothing of it, just somebody else waiting for the tram, until I started feeling weird. The streets were quiet and dark and there was nobody else in sight. Just me and this guy, and I started wondering why he chose to stand this close to me when he had so much space to avoid dealing with people. I couldn't comprehend anybody wanting to socialize this late at night, and given that I wasn't very social myself. So I glanced at him, trying not to overthink it. He was a bald-headed, beady-eyed giant, tall and built like a bear, big belly and big arms and legs. I was 5'2" and scrawny, but that wasn't what scared me. It was the fact that he was staring right at me, unblinking and expressionless, not even attempting to look away or act embarrassed. No, this guy wanted me to feel uncomfortable. I instantly felt weak and shaky. Cold shivers ran down my spine. This was not normal. I realized quickly that I was not in a good situation. I couldn't miss the last tram. Walking home was out of the question, and my phone was almost dead. I was a shy kid, and I didn't have what it takes to scare the guy away. I knew that, but I had to try at least. I only managed to utter a small "Hi," trying my best to startle him out of whatever he was thinking. But my attempt failed in the face of his silent and threatening aura. He kept staring, no sign of intent to reply. He was enjoying this. Feeling the panic rising inside me, I told myself to stay calm and think rationally. Maybe he didn't hear me. Minutes passed by, his stare continued to burn on my skin, and there was no tram in sight. Ignoring him didn't work, so I mustered up the courage to speak once again, this time louder. "What do you want? Stop staring at me." No answer. He definitely heard me this time, though. I felt myself start to get angry. I didn't want to let this guy get to me anymore. I didn't want to continue to give him the satisfaction of watching me squirm nervously and pretend that his behavior didn't bother me. I took a deep breath and I forced myself to start thinking. I knew what I can't do. I can't fight him off if he makes a move, and there's nothing that I can say or do that will get him to stop. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I knew that they weren't good. If I tried to walk away, he would probably follow. I could run, but he would most likely catch up to me before I could even tire him out, since his legs weren't much longer than mine. Even if I managed to somehow lose him, walking home through the dark alleys past the junkies and people that were always prowling about, it could land me in an even worse situation. I could pretend to call someone, but he might feel compelled to act much sooner if he felt threatened. So what can I do? The only thing I could realistically be able to do was to try and outsmart him somehow. So I started developing a few plans, depending on which tram showed up, trying to confirm whether he was just amusing himself and actually waiting for the tram too, or popped over for other more suspicious reasons, and whether I could get any kind of help. I couldn't let him see where I lived, so if he followed me, I would have to be prepared to employ whatever strategy was available. And for that, I needed to stay rational and aware of my surroundings. While I was still thinking, the first tram showed up. It was the one that I could have taken home, but this one pulled into the depot right in my neighborhood, forcing me to lead him to my home. I hoped that he would board it and leave me be, but he didn't. He just kept watching me carefully. I let the tram go, desperately hoping that it wasn't the last one to head home. He continued to watch, and I sensed that he was quite happy with how things were going. I put up with it for another 15 minutes, trying to focus on another plan of action. I could not pretend that I needed the other tram, the one going to a different area of the city, and just ride to the next station and then get off as soon as possible, so I don't end up too far and miss the tram that I need. This tram showed up next. With my heart in my throat, I boarded it and sat down by the door. He got on it too, but sat by himself in the back, pretty far away from where I was. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking that this might still go well. When the tram reached the next station, I got up and out, not looking back and hoping that it was all over. But when I stepped on the pavement and watched the tram drive away, I couldn't see him in it. I turned my head slowly and was terrified to see him walking towards me, looking slightly upset. He stopped just a few steps away and resumed staring, this time with a clear hint of malice, still though in silence. My vision blurred as I fought back tears of despair. He wasn't going to let me go. The helplessness that I felt was unbearable, but I couldn't cry. I couldn't give up, and I had to find a way. I had to get home tonight. The prospect of what might happen to me any time now if I didn't was becoming all too real. My head was full of unanswered questions, regrets, and horrible scenarios. I wanted so badly to not have to think anymore, to not have to fight back the tears and stay composed. But I knew that this would be his cue to enact whatever messed up plan he had in mind. I couldn't let that happen. And then I saw the final tram approach, the only one that I could take now, and I got on as quickly as my trembling legs would allow me to. When I was in, bright lights enveloping me, my mind snapped out of its nightmarish spiral of fear, and it allowed me a moment of clarity. I had 3 stops to figure this out. I sat down at the front and looked at the driver. He was a frail old man, blissfully unaware of my distress. Getting the driver's attention was a no-go. We passed 1 stop, and there was nobody else waiting to climb aboard. I turned around, fully expecting to see that the psycho had followed me again, but I did not expect him to be sitting right behind me. He wasn't taking any chances. He was making sure that I wouldn't try anything like last time. I shot him a hateful glare and allowed my anger to overcome my fear. I stood up and purposefully walked over to another seat, in the middle of the tram car. I wanted to make it clear that I would not put up with his BS any longer. He got up too and slowly walked up to a spot 2 seats behind and diagonal from me, and then sat down with the tiniest arrogant grin on his face. Already expecting it, I shot up and stood by the middle door instead, determined to keep him on his toes. If I stood right by the door, he wouldn't have any idea which station I planned to get off at. He remained where he was at this time, convinced that I was bluffing. After all, this was really the last tram. There was nothing else that I could possibly do to escape now. He must have reckoned it too, so my defiance was only a funny act to him. This was my chance. I had to take the risk, and it had to work. There were 3 doors on the tram, and they all opened and closed at the same time, and they stayed open for around 5 seconds, before closing again if no buttons were pressed or people detected on the threshold. The next stop, the only one left before mine, came into view. The tram slowed to a stop. The doors open, and I made no move. 5 long seconds passed, and the doors started to close. I bolted out and I ran for it, reaching the back door as fast as I could, and slamming the button to open it again. My whole body was tense with adrenaline. I waited a long and painful second, and I jumped back in, keeping my head low and holding my breath and crouching behind the nearest seat. I shut my eyes tightly and exhaled slowly while thanking the gods that I didn't believe in for that button working, and wishing with all my might for him to not have seen me before I got back in. As I was waiting to hear his footsteps approaching, I pictured him frantically looking for me. Was he still on the tram, face screwed up in anger, head turning like a fat and ugly meerkat? Or was he catching his breath on the pavement of the last station, mad eyes searching the darkness for me? As the tram continued its loud journey, banging and clanging in sync with my heartbeat, I dared smile to myself, imagining his face when he realized that he messed up. Hands on my chest, I did my best to stealthily look around the corner and found nobody looking back. I stood up in excitement and threw myself off the foggy back window. There he was, standing alone and victimless in that slowly fading out of sight station, watching me leave him and his vile plans behind. And giving somebody the middle finger never felt so good.